So, as far as I know, this is the first federal probe that the US is doing into self-driving cars. There's been regional investigations and state investigations based on the previous crashes. But to my knowledge, and if somebody else knows different, I'd love to hear it. The article doesn't quite say, but I think this is the first federal level investigation into self-driving cars for Tesla. And I believe that the article is saying that it's also affecting their stock price because, it's a serious probe. So they're citing multiple crashes, one of which resulted in a fatality. And more specifically, they are going to be looking at the ability to detect and appropriately respond to fog and other reduced visibility conditions. 4 crashes have been reported in such scenarios, so fog and low visibility, where FSD was engaged. So I'm assuming these are the 4 here. Model Y, Model 3, Model 3, pedestrian fatality, which unfortunately is terrible. You never want to see a fatality, obviously, right? And then model crashes, Rimrock, Arizona, Nipton, California, Red Mills, Virginia, and Collinsville, Ohio. So 4 different areas of the United States, which some of you may or may not be familiar with. I'll give you some thoughts there. But this is the kind of stuff that catches my attention, right? Because when we talk about confusion matrices, about accuracies, about false negatives, false positives, this is it in action, right? And this is one of the reasons why I'm really not so bullish on FSD. Because as we've all acknowledged, as we've all talked about, mistakes are going to happen, right? Models are not perfect. Models aren't always able to be perfect. But in those false positives and in those false negatives, there's consequences, right? One consequence can be that you get a spam message in your Gmail inbox when you're not supposed to, right? There are still companies out there that actively work to defeat spam filters, and they're successful at it, right? That's a false negative, right? Spam making it into your inbox is a false negative. That still happens. But it's an inconvenience, right? Nobody dies because of a spam message in your inbox. But here, there are consequences. I mean, this particular article doesn't say, but, unfortunately there was a fatality, but there could have also been other serious injuries in these passenger car crashes, right? Just because it's not a fatality doesn't mean that somebody didn't go through a traumatic experience or some sort of significant experience, right? So I wanted to share this out because, this is the type of stuff that I think we should all be considering. Another reason why this stood out to me is because they're specifically citing fog and other reduced visibility conditions. Okay, so what does that mean for training? Well, it means that they don't have enough instances, enough occurrences of these cars in these conditions, right? Also, we were talking about desert communities and wind. Well, sandstorms happen in desert communities, right? We do have, today is not a sandstorm day, but we do have situations where highways have very limited visibility, or in some cases shut down, particularly in Arizona, where there's just too much sand blowing, so it's unsafe to drive. So think about that. If we're data scientists working on FSD, are we comfortable saying that the training hours and, which is also to say a lot of training video that we have for fog and that reduced visibility, Does that transfer over to sandstorms? Maybe, maybe not. Does that transfer over to like a heavy rainfall? You know how like there can be like heavy rain so much to the point where like your wipers can't keep up and it's basically reduced visibility because of the water. You know, I'm sure we've all driven in those rainstorms. Are you, the data scientist on the FSD team, comfortable saying, well, our cars handle fog okay, and that's reduced visibility, so they should also do okay in heavy rain and that visibility? Let me know. Let me know. Are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable signing off on that? You sure about that? You sure about like, is that something that we're comfortable doing? Let me know. Give me some feedback in the chat. Because there might be situations where somebody asks you to sign off on things like that. You know, maybe not for self-driving cars, but hey, we tested this other kind of sorta related scenario, and we're kind of confident that it's going to do okay in this other scenario, but we just don't have the time to test it, or we don't have enough samples. Can you sign off on this? Are you willing to do that? It's a tough question, right? Rex says, I wonder how well the mitigating data imbalance techniques have done in these types of scenarios. Have they done well? I mean, have they done well at all though, Rex? I mean, to your point, you know, we usually only hear about the accidents, not the near misses, right? So I hear you. I hear you on that, Rex. But should we have imbalanced data in these scenarios? Is imbalanced data an okay thing? Or how about this? Look, I mean, a federal probe is not a good thing, right? Because that's the first step to federal regulation, right? What if the end result was a requirement that Tesla had to have X number of training hours or samples or miles, whatever you want to say, in every single possible weather condition out there? Like that could be a realistic government regulation, right? Where the government can say you can't launch FSD until you prove that you have a completely balanced data set of all these possible weather conditions out there. I mean, I'm not predicting that's what's going to happen, but that's a reasonable outcome, right? That sounds like pretty standard regulation. What do you think about that? Leo says, well, I don't think I need to answer that. Leo, is that you practicing for a future court case? what are you referring to there? Yeah, let us know, Leo. But it sounds like Leo's practicing his denials to the government inquiry. Lawman says career death if we say that. Yeah. It's not good, right? It's not good if it's traced back to your sign off, right? Hey, Chandra, welcome to the chat. I think it's your first time. We do ask people to introduce themselves. Let us know your city, state, province, country, okay? You know, here's another thing that concerns me about FSD. And to me, this is one of their dirty little secrets. And I call out the Waymo people on Twitter about this because the Waymo people are the worst at this. They always run away when you ask them this. Rimrock, Arizona, and Nipton, California, for those of you that don't know, are fairly remote communities. You know, Nipton, California does not have a very large population. It's actually a very small city. And a lot of these FSD companies go to these cities. And I'm highlighting these two because they're particularly both of these companies target these small cities, especially in Arizona. So Rimrock, Arizona caught my eye when I saw this. And the reason I say that is because think about that. Well, first of all, for those of you not in the US, Arizona is in the western part of the US. The western part of the US is like the newer part of the US, right? It was settled much later than places like New York, where Rex and Leo are from. So that means we have newer infrastructure, right? Our roads are newer. We have less people, so less crowded roads. The west coast of the United States doesn't have toll booths. We really don't have toll highways like you're going to find on a lot of the East Coast, right? And because we have new infrastructure, not only do we have new roads, we also have better lighting on the roads. We have better, traffic signals on the road. We have newer signs. It doesn't really snow a lot in Arizona. You know, in some parts of the West it does, but a lot of Western cities in the United States don't get a lot of snow. Arizona does not get a lot of rain. There's, like 340 days of sunshine every year. So it's basically ideal road conditions, right? Driving here in Rimrock, Arizona is night and day difference to driving in the middle of New York City, right? So a lot of these companies, be careful, because Waymo, for example, will tell you we have billions and billions of training hours built into our cars. Our cars are very safe. But if those billions and billions of hours are under ideal driving conditions, is that a good thing? Is that simulating the different things that can happen? Probably not, right? So as a data, and I'm saying that from a public safety perspective, right? That's how you end up with this, right? Because you can't simulate fog conditions in Rimrock, Arizona, where there is no fog. It rarely gets cold enough for that type of fog. Nipton rarely gets fog, right? So you're failing because you're in cities that don't simulate it, right? From a data science perspective, for us as data scientists, we need to be actively aware of that, right? We need to be actively aware of those imbalances in our data set and realize that, hey, we're creating, if we're relying on these training hours, these driving hours, then we ourselves are intentionally creating a data set that will fail. That will ultimately fail once you introduce it and you put it out there into more scenarios where it hasn't had the same experience, right? So I think there's lessons to be learned there, both on the consumer side of things as well as the data scientist design side of things. Okay? So let me look at some of the Arasia? No, Arasi. I think it's Arasi. Hey Arasi, nice to see you. I think it's your first time. Thank you so much from Lagos, Nigeria. Thanks for introducing yourself. Appreciate that. Leo says not only data for weather conditions, but how the model behaves on different conditions on different roads. Also, what are the warranties that can handle latency? What is the warranty that it can handle latency in the bad weather conditions? Yeah, Leo, you're bringing up two great points. So let's separate these out because there are two good points here in Leo's statements here. One is also the road conditions themselves, right? Can you say that the car will handle fog equal or how do I want to state this? I guess what comes to mind is like the interactions of these conditions. Are you comfortable saying that you want to train the car for foggy conditions? Or do you want to make a difference between foggy conditions on uphills and downhills? Right? Kind of, maybe it makes a difference, right? Because to me, I'm thinking that the angle of lights, like, because assuming you're at night, right? Or, most people turn on their lights in the fog no matter what time it is. But the angle of your headlights is different whether you're uphill or downhill, right? So are you comfortable just saying, well, we're just going to train the model to handle fog? Or do you need to have the slope of the road as part of your inputs, right? That could be an input, right? What is the slope you're on? That could be an input for your network, for your model. I'm assuming it's a neural network, but for your model. But then, to Leo's second point, well, didn't you just add another node to your model? An input node? And then as we discussed, that has an exponential effect on the number of calculations you're running, right? So now latency can become an issue. And, a car is in constantly changing conditions, especially at speed, right? I mean, what do they always tell you? That at 60 miles an hour, you're covering you're covering 100 meters in like no time, right? But a lot can happen in 100 meters as far as, like driving conditions, right? So, yeah, I mean, I like Leo's two distinct points there. Oh, okay. I said I don't think I need to answer because you guys know my position regarding FSD. Well, Leo, you know that I also share that position, right? So here's another thing we should be talking about. So every once in a while, we've talked about risks. But sometimes when you talk about risks, you're really talking about them from like an internal audit perspective, right? And that's very important to be concerned with those, okay? And there is something known as a reputation risk, right? There's multiple types of risks, but obviously, like for example, there's a legal risk here, right? Clearly, there's a legal risk. The people in these accidents are going to bring legal cases against you. Now you have a federal probe, right? That's a legal risk. But there's also a reputation risk, right? So Leo is against FSD, I'm against FSD, but there's a lot of people who aren't, right? There's a lot of people who say, oh, that's crazy. Elon Musk will solve this. Of course, we're going to have self-driving cars, blah, blah. But what does this article do to that? Doesn't this article take away a little bit of that public confidence? Right? It kind of chips away at your reputation of your company and of you as a data scientist. Are you going to trust the next time somebody else out there says they have some sort of a self-driving whatever? What does an article like this do for your confidence in those self-driving semi-trucks that are supposedly around the corner, right? I think Elon has said they're going to be out there by 2026 or something like that. Are you more or less confident about those semi-trucks? Now it's the same problems with the models, but the truck is bigger, right? Maybe if the truck had been involved in these crashes, there would have been more fatalities. That's not good, right? So what then, right? There's a reputation risk here too, right? Because I get it. Some of you in the chat right now might be saying, "Oh, Leo's crazy," or "Dennis is crazy," right? You know, of course we're going to figure this out. But what if we don't? What if articles like this keep on coming? What if you find out that the pedestrian fatality was some little lady crossing the street? Because, you know, she was moving slower than the average pedestrian. So the car, you know, the models don't have experience with slower moving pedestrians, right? They assume that the pedestrian's going to move at a certain rate, and they make decisions based on that. Well, what happens if your grandmother just wasn't walking fast enough? Like, that's terrible, right? There's a reputation risk here too. Rex says, wow, Rex, this might be your longest comment yet. It's going to take me a while to read this. I wish I knew more about the potential of government regulation in these processes and its ramifications. Regulation is not uncommon in other industries, so I wouldn't be surprised if government regulation would step in and start setting up regulating parameters. Now, what evidence and principle would these parameters be based on would also be an interesting topic for sure. You know, Rex, I'm going to give you a little pushback here. I'm not sure if I'm 100% on board with your statements. And, you know, and that's not a knock on Rex, right? I think, you know, I think I have a different perspective because I'm, you know, I'm an old guy, right? I'm like, I got 1 foot in retirement, right? Like I'm spending my days playing golf, right? So I have a different perspective on this, Rex. And the perspective I'm going to give you is based on, you know, me living through basically the growth of the internet, right? I graduated college in 1999, which was the start of the .com wave. So I've been riding the .com wave like my whole career, right? Because that's basically what I've seen. And, you know, and I told you guys, you know, I have a background working in video games. You know, I paid for college by working in the video game industry. And, so I'm not going to put myself out there as a legal expert, but I think that if you do your research and you talk to other people who are much more educated than me, the general consensus is that the government has always shied away, and I'm talking about the US government here, has shied away from specific industry regulation, right? The way they've always worked was they make the threat of regulation. They tell the companies to get their act together and then to make the companies self-regulate. And then that's how, during that time, you had all these trade associations pop up and say, okay, government, don't regulate us. We've built a trade association. We're all pledging to play by these same rules, and we're all going to be self-monitoring, self-policing. Don't give us any regulation. Right? That's been the working model. And the reason I say this, the reason why I'm confident in saying this is because I saw this live and in person. If you think about like the video game industry, right? The video game industry was one of the first industries that I know of that did this successfully. Where, you know, if you remember, like, you know, well, I mean, some of you weren't born, but in the mid 90s, late 90s, where, you know, the consoles were like getting super popular, PC games are getting super popular. There was always concerns about, you know, the content of the video games and then the violence of video games and things like that, right? And the video game industry was very much under the threat of government regulation. And they avoided it by 2 things. 1, they came up with a trade association. And 2, they came up with the ESRB, right? The Electronic Software Rating Board, right? And that's the one that started putting those labels on video games saying, okay, this is for kids, this is for mature audiences, you know, this has violence, whatever. right? They did that all on their own. And for those of you who don't know, that all happened like in the late 90s, like 95 to like 99, you know, in that range. That's when like the ESRB came along and did that. And that was basically the video game industry's response to, hey, okay, government, don't regulate us. We'll do it ourselves, right? Because, you know, really, when you think about that, if you think about prior to that, the last industry, big industry that was really regulated like that was basically the auto industry, right? You could argue for oil, you know, but basically, you know, they wanted to avoid everyone wants to avoid becoming the auto industry in terms of the regulation side of it, right? So the video game industry successfully did that in the late 90s. And again, that led into the dot-com wave, right? 99, 2000, 2001, that's basically where like the internet took off, right? And if you think about that model, there basically haven't been any industries that have been regulated since then, because now everybody follows that model, right? I mean, that's what they do. I mean, social media hasn't been regulated, right? Because they're also kind of following that same model, right? That, you know, we'll be self-policing, right? So really, Rex, that's why I'm kind of giving you pushback here, because I don't agree with saying that regulation is not uncommon. It's common in the older industries, kind of like the industries that came to prominence prior to that time. But if you look at most tech industries and most industries established since 2000, they've basically have followed that same model, right? You know, that's basically what they do. If anything, the tail has kind of wagged the dog, right? Because look at the current state of sports betting, right? I mean, those guys took it full circle. They went from daily fantasy to forming their own trade association to self-regulation to moving regulation, right? And then they used that trade association to actively change the laws. And now we have sports betting, you know, what, like, I think, how many states do we have sports betting now? Like, you know, I think, I want to say it's like approaching 20 states now, something like that, right? So if anything, it goes the other way, Rex, where the trade associations drive the regulation change to their benefit, right? All right, so I'll get off my high horse now, but that's my understanding, Rex. So that's why I kind of got to give you that perspective, or share my perspective with you on that, because I think that most industries, whether it's a positive thing or not, right? Because I don't necessarily agree that's positive. It's all self-managing now. If anything, there's a lack of regulation, right? Like, you know, like, we have plenty of evidence for plenty of things out there that aren't laws, aren't regulated, because there is no regulating body. The industries are doing it themselves. All right, Kelvin says, nice to see you live again, Dennis. Hey, Kelvin, good to see you back too. I always love people when people come back, so welcome back, Kelvin. Rahul, our good friend Rahul, how are you, my friend, from the mountains of India? Hello, Dennis. Sorry for being away for 3 days. I had some personal problems. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Rahul. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well, you know, but we miss you, and, you know, we're here to support you if you ever want to reach out for help, Rahul, so hope you're doing well. Sorry about the typos, no glasses, and dyslexia kicking hard today. Oh, and I'm the one that needs coffee, huh? It sounds like you're a mess over there, Leo. Maybe you're the one that... Just kidding, Leo, but you're not doing too many typos. You're doing just fine. Leo is sending out his good wishes to Rahul. Yeah, Rahul, you have good wishes from all of us. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Yeah, Anthony, let us know where you're from, okay? We always ask people to introduce themselves. Okay, Anthony is from New Jersey. Okay, got it. Okay, so Anthony says, they should train AI on a rally cross track and high-speed race track. They should train AI in special operations driving and VIP protective operation, and they should train AI in the worst case natural disaster environments. That's very interesting, Anthony. Now, Anthony, are you saying that they should be trained for that usage? Or they should be trained for... or they should be trained because of the extreme conditions those present, but still be put on the roads? Because I can see it both ways. One I'm on board with, the other one I'm not so on board with. So give me some more insight there, Anthony. Give me some more detail there. Yeah, no, I get it. It should be trained in that environment and pass it, but for use in that environment or for use on like public roads? Like, are you saying that we should be training for the most extreme cases? Okay, not just with cars, but with everything. Anthony, I don't know if I'm on board with that. And I'm going to tell you why. So the Waymo people got really pissed at me when I posted a YouTube short one day. And by the way, in case you guys don't know this, but all of these companies, pharma, cars, oil, whatever, they all use bot networks to detect when somebody's speaking negative about them, right? And the Waymo people got pissed at me because I had posted commentary on a TikTok that somebody had posted. Maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 3 months ago. Maybe you guys saw it. It was very popular. It went viral on TikTok. There was a video of a Waymo car that was, here's the main line of traffic, right? Going this way. It was a one-way street. And a Waymo car wanted to pull into traffic. And the Waymo car made a turn into the direction of traffic, but it stayed in the lane, right? So the Waymo car was smart enough to know that it turned and it landed in a lane, but it wasn't smart enough to know that it was on a one-way street and it shouldn't have made a turn into the traffic. It should have made a turn with the traffic. And my commentary was, something, that immediately jumped out at me because I've seen it in other algorithms. And that's the Waymo people, cars, implementation, whatever you want to call it, is don't confuse staying in between two lanes as a self-driving car. Because that's the mistake you're doing, right? That's the meta mistake that you're making. You're saying, oh, look, the car is staying in the lane. It must know how to drive. No, it just knows how to stay in between white road markers, white lane markers. That's all the algorithm has learned. It hasn't learned, to be human. It hasn't learned about one-way streets. It hasn't learned how to drive. It has just learned to keep the steering wheel in between two white markers, right? That's all it's learned. So Anthony, the reason I'm not on board with your statements is because don't confuse the car passing a high-speed driving course as driving. What have you actually done? You've actually just taught a car to go at unsafe speeds really, really fast, right? Or if you're teaching it like a VIP protection course, like evasive maneuvers, defensive driving, you haven't taught it how to drive. You've just taught it how to change lanes super quick. I don't want that car on the road, right? To me, that approach would just succeed at making the cars even more dangerous. Right? That's really all we'd be doing there. We would be saying, okay, now let's just let the cars swerve faster, right? So I don't know if I'm on board with that, right? I think it'd be too disruptive. I think if Leo says, I think what he meant is they should perform well in extreme situations and environments. But again, Leo, don't confuse passing those tests with knowing how to do those items or those tasks. If the Waymo car really knew how to drive, right? It would know to make the turn with traffic, not against traffic. But the Waymo car just knows how to stay in between two lanes because it correctly identified a lane and said, hey, I can go over there. That's not good, right? So that's kind of like my premise, Leo, that just because it did pass like a high-speed course doesn't mean that you like taught it anything, right? So if anything, like I said, I think it would make it worse. The generalization come out of that training stage is risky. Yeah, it's like way too risky, right? So yeah, I mean, yeah, Anthony, I appreciate the thoughts, but completely not on board with that. Anthony adds, AI needs to train all around, the super slow to the super quick. Yeah, sure. But what is that threshold, right? Like how much of that do you need? Because according to this article, we're nowhere near enough, right? And then also, to me, I think the hardest part too is that it's going to require like super like the maintenance and update you're going to need for those algorithms is going to be like on a near like daily, if not hourly basis, right? Road conditions change all the time. Road conditions change constantly. Like, I'm really curious, you know, I never seen anybody talk about this, but I'm curious to know how self-driving cars handle detours, right? Your road, you know, let's just say you're driving from school to home or work to home, right? That's not always going to be the same route. You know, you're going to have detours, you're going to have construction zones, road closures, or a road that used to be 2 lanes is now 1 lane, right? Like, are you generalizing on the route, or are you actually able to make those like quick changes that happen when you're driving? I don't know. I think that's an interesting question, right? I mean, if you saw some of the criticism coming out of last week's Tesla event, you know, Tesla was out there saying, look at us, we had all these automated robo-taxi drives that were shuttling the event attendees. And it's like, yeah, but you were on a closed course on a movie set with ideal weather conditions. You know, it was generalizing to that route, not necessarily learning anything new, right? Leo says that's why we're not confident in FSD. Yeah. Yeah, Leo says, but not necessarily going to extremes that can make the system overwhelmed or generalize what it was not supposed to do. Yep. Hmm. So Anthony's saying that is what having AI be able to handle any extreme conditions before a training is what to work on now. Well, let's be clear on something, guys. Just in case anybody is unclear on this, FSD is not AI. 100% not AI. It's machine learning, right? Machine learning and AI, not the same thing. So yeah, so let's clear up that misconception there if anybody else, has that with Anthony. But this is not AI. This is all machine learning. And also that's part of the problem, right? You're gonna have to forgive me on this. Somebody can definitely look this up and verify me. But if I remember right, an FSD is actually a combination of 5 machine learning algorithms, right? Because you need algorithms to read what's ahead of you, right? To read the road conditions. That's one. You need another algorithm to identify what's out there, right? I think that's a separate one from the first one. And then there's a predictive algorithm for what those things are going to do. So if the first algorithm tells you you have a cyclist to the right, there's another algorithm that predicts what that cyclist is going to do, right? So that's the third algorithm. The fourth algorithm determines your best action, right? So now I know that I have a cyclist over here, a red light coming up ahead, and I got a pedestrian over on that corner. I have predicted what all those things are going to do, right? The red light's going to stay red. The cyclist is going to slow down. The pedestrian is going to start crossing. Now, what is my next best action? That's the fourth algorithm. And then the fifth algorithm actually drives the car controls. Okay, I need a brake. I need to turn right. I need to turn left. So somebody can verify me on that. I got I read that a while ago, but it's actually at least 5 different algorithms, and it's all machine learning. It's not AI. And like I said, that's part of the problem, because now you got 5 algorithms that all have to be correct, and they all have to interface with each other, and they all have to do it in a very, very, very short amount of time, right? That's maybe a problem that can't be solved, right? So something else for you guys to think about. Yeah, if anybody's under the impression that this is AI, it's not AI. It's all machine learning. It's all machine learning. But yeah, so guys, I posted this article in the Discord. So if you want to look at it, if you want to discuss it with other people, if you want to, maybe think about it and other thoughts come to you later, please do that. But, I like sharing this type of stuff out because I think it's really interesting. Obviously, we have some people who share those opinions about FSD. And like I said, I think it's important to look at this because it degrades the public confidence over time, right? I think there's a net negative effect over time. Sarvesh says, why aren't LLMs not integrated into self-driving cars for contextual awareness? Sarvesh, that's a good question. Maybe somebody's working on that, but my guess would be speed, right? You need these systems to work pretty fast. So my guess is that there's probably some sort of speed limitation out there. I mean, I'm sure all of us have examples where LLMs were slow, right? That's easy to find. I'm sure some of us have been impressed by when LLMs were fast. But in a FSD situation, you're talking about like maybe not even milliseconds, maybe microsecond measurements, right? So that's my guess, Sarvesh, that they're just not fast enough. And then also remember I just mentioned about how you're gonna need to update these systems, right? How do you quickly update an LLM on a remote car? That's not easy, right? Leo says, Dennis, we could have an is a AI or non AI moment in the show. That would be fun. That would be fun. That would be fun. I don't know. You'd have to come up with a long list, though, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It would be fun. It would be fun. Thanks for that, Leo. I appreciate that addition there. But Sarvesh, yeah, you're asking a great question there. But that's my guess. You know, if anybody else wants to put guesses, but that's my guess, that the speed isn't there. Right? I mean, LLMs are great, but they're not fast. I mean, I don't think anybody's excited about the speed of LLMs, right? We're excited about LLMs because of the text generation and because of the number of questions they can answer, right? Because they're so broad, right? I mean, you can ask it for travel tips and you can ask it to create an image. I mean, it's a pretty broad tool, right? That's why we're impressed. But that's not speed, right? So that's my guess, Sarvesh. It's the speed.